Hi, everyone, and welcome to Latinx YC, where we discuss all the good, the bad, and the ugly of U.S. politics from a Latino and Latina and Latinx perspective. Hola, querida, ¿cómo estás?
Bien. So nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. Welcome to summery weather, right? We're all wearing more summer clothes, which is nice. Need some sun in the back here.
Yes.
My name is Clemencia Herrera, and I am the founder of Moira Studio, a cross-cultural advertising agency that works with progressive political campaigns, organizations, and advocacy initiatives to engage with Latino audiences in an authentic and caring way, which is how they deserve.
Yes, thank you for doing that. And I am Cecilia del Cid, an environmental and social justice practitioner, an immigrant from Latin America, from Guatemala, and community weaver, also working on media. So tell me, Clem, what are we going to talk today about?
Man. All right, you ready for this?
Yes, tell me.
Today we're going to talk about a topic that was brought to my attention through a project that we were working on for a client, which is how the political and social discourse that has been going on in the past few years, 5 years or so, is deeply affecting Latinx's mental health. And in particular, young Latinx, but it's just affecting everyone overall. I thought that this was a really important topic to talk about because, yes, this is a podcast about politics, but some of the legislation and some of the rhetoric that has been going on is actually damaging. Some of it is like keeping people from actually progressing, and two, some of it is actually, emotionally and mentally exhausting to people. So this is another reason why, we need to get our ish together, because the repercussions of having, for example, youth with deteriorating mental health is going to be felt for, the next 30, 40, 50 years. And it's going to have a huge economic impact. And also, it's going to take a whole generation to repair. So, wanted to kind of start with some, stats.
Some numbers.
Yeah. First of all, some of the stuff that's been going on, for example, the death of people of color at the hands of the police, violence against, hate crimes, increasingly polarized political dialogue are some of the reasons for and also, COVID and all the things that have been going on with COVID, people losing their jobs, people, losing their life savings, people on unemployment, has, some of these have been the reasons for deteriorating mental health. And this is a staggering number here. And during 2020, the proportion of mental health related emergency department visits in teenagers, so it's like 12 to 17, increased by 31% compared to 2019. And then during February 21st through March 20th, 2021, suspected suicide attempt ER visits went up 50% higher among girls that are 12 to 17 compared to 2019. So there's a grave issue here. I mean, that number just broke my heart. 50% higher for girls, that just breaks my heart. And so, you know, when you are, so some of this is like COVID related, you know, the isolation and things like that. But there's also, you know, as I mentioned before, fear that, you know, you're gonna go to school and you're gonna get shot, or fear that you're gonna walk down the street and, you know, something could happen and you could get killed by you know, by the state, by someone that is committing a hate crime, or by the state. And then, you know, not having protections in place, you know, by the systems that are supposed to protect you, are also a real source of stress. And then, you know, men, especially Latinx men, who are very who have grown up with this, you know, mentality that they have to be the providers, the breadwinners, the supporters of the family. If they lose their job, they kind of lose their whole sense of being, and there has been a higher rate of suicides among men because of this. So, you know, to the point that we're talking about people taking their lives, it's dire. It's really bad.
Yeah. I mean, I thank you for that kind of intro. I think when we started talking about it and I reviewed some of the information you put together and like some other information, and I recall conversations from past guests, you know, we know that even though as community we sometimes don't know how to get involved, or we don't get involved in the right numbers. We have a lot of abstentionism, or we think because of our country experiences, if we're like diaspora and immigrant, we think politics are dirty, like they don't affect me, I kind of stay out of it. I think that everything is political, right? Like every decision that is made in where power gets decided has an effect on how you live your daily lives. And it happens to be that for many decades now, the systems that are been in place to help us have a semblance of that American myth that is the American dream, you know, have been slowly being dismantled. And when by the time the pandemic 2020 hits, I mean, we were already eroding many of those systems were already kind of like barely standing, and it just really I think highlighted, like shone the light on how deficient we were, right? So when I think when I hear you do that description, I think immediately like, oh, that's patriarchy, right? When we say our men subscribe to this sense of toxic masculinity in which they cannot cope or don't have mechanisms to cope with other feelings, or the feeling of disempowerment, like, you know, that those things that build resilience, that's one. Then I think of like, oh, there is capitalism, that idea that if you cannot provide, if you are not grinding, if you are not being out there beating yourself to a pulp to provide, to ganarte el dinero, ganarte la plata, then you know there is no purpose for you. You have failed. So, and you know, that sense of despair, hopelessness that leads you. And then once you begin to get in that spiral, which is kind of like a spiral down, if you don't have insurance, or you don't have a cultural awareness, or you have no access to someone who speaks in Spanish, or someone who understands you culturally, how are you going to get help? Right? So it was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
And I think it is, and we need to begin to recognize that all of these things have been constructed by policy, right? By legislation, by ideas of how we shape society and some people have gotten ahead and some people have been left behind. And it happens to be that communities of color were left behind. Black, indigenous, and communities of color have been left behind. And this is just like, I think a symptom, a very scary symptom, like to think about an increase of 51%, to think about how women in particular feel that stress or that desperation or that disconnection. And we know that dying by suicide is there is also a lot of a stigma if you come from like a religious background, and whether it's like there is a lot of weight to it in not understand, like a deficiency of you as in your moral character, without understanding that it is like a chemical imbalance in your brain is like a chemical imbalance in your blood and having high cholesterol. It's a medical, not that there is not psychological and other things to address it, but I think policies that have left us without good medical health that addresses medical health that addresses mental health, the ability to have access to safety nets, the ability to have access to the things that we need in order to thrive in education and safety, going to school in a safe environment when you don't have to worry about someone harming you.
Yeah.
I think
it's like you're expected to work your butt off, for pay a bunch of taxes, get absolutely nothing in return, like get no health insurance, get no help from the government, and then go to school, afraid for your life, get absolutely no respect. and so it's like, what, how do you get out of that? You just, you're supposed to just, kill yourself working, work yourself to the bone with absolutely, with like low wages and, barely scraping by. Like, these are all, things that just pile on top of each other, and then you're afraid that your kids may get killed. You're at a school shooting. You're afraid that the police are gonna do something to them. It's just like, how do you negotiate all of that? And there's no one to talk to. You don't have the money to go to a therapist. You don't have access to any government programs to help with mental health, and so it's like you're sort of in this trap, right? You're just trapped in this predicament of this just nothing I can do.
And you were giving me another number before we started, when you were saying Latinx community suffer a lot of like anxiety, depression, substance abuse. And if you have that life that you just described, if you work all these hours, barely live in a place that you don't feel safe because you can afford a lot more rent because rent keeps going up, your salary isn't, people turn to substance. They want to numb themselves. So even that idea of like substance abuse or substance consumption is an attempt to self-medication, right? It's an attempt to bring some type of pleasure, release, calmness to your life, because there is nothing. Yes, there is. And we numb ourselves through many things. Teenagers do it a lot with like, this. We are addicted. We scroll. Our brain responds. It releases the feel good hormones when you get likes, and it also releases other hormones when you get bullied online. So like, I'm not surprised that that particularly girls were more prone to those numbers increase for the suicidal attempts because of social media. So we want to, I think we are generically created as as beings to have joy, to have pleasure, to look for those moments of steadiness and connection. And the system in which we live takes all those opportunities out. You can, even if
you're working two jobs, you can't even like go hang out with a friend and talk through, any kind of challenge that you're having. You're when you don't have your basic necessities met, unfortunately, mental health is not considered as a basic necessity yet for many people. It's not, it's not treated like you said, like you have high blood pressure or, anything like that. It's actually, especially with Latinos, it's like, therapy, it's only for the people that are,
absolutely lost their marbles.
Like, that's just for people that have a lot of issues, and no, it's like it's not, but it, especially Latino men, they're just like, I don't need therapy, I don't need any help, I don't need to talk to anyone, and it's hard for them to even talk with their friends about it. And so they just go into this downward spiral on their own because, like you said, machismo has created this unfortunate barrier for them to be able to share their feelings with other people, and so it just makes matters worse.
But talking about the rhetoric, and we think about right now the big kind of like, we are in Pride. This is June. This is Pride Month, but we hear a lot of legislation about what it means, of rhetoric against the LGBTQ community, and legislation who attacks their safety and their health. And if you think that in our culture, those traits that will require you to recognize that you have a need, that you need help, are identified to be weaknesses and to be traits that are women look for help, or like people who are queer look for help, then you will not you don't want to, there's a lot of biases that align in that line. But I recall a conversation with a friend, a contemporary friend, similar age, a woman, and I kept saying, I think you need therapy. It's like, I was like, only people who are, then gave me a list of things, a very negative tone of who goes to therapy. And I said, well, is that what you think of me? And she said, why, do you go to therapy? And I'm like, for the last 15 years, I've been with my therapist. And I think then she felt bad because she had used some very derogatory terms to describe who goes to therapy. And then I said, I go to therapy. And you know what it looks like? My life is like, my stuff is together because I have help, because I can process, because I can think through this. And when I cannot think, someone can hold a space for me and reflect back, and don't let my mind go in that disco rayado that repeats and repeats the things that are not working.
Yes. Yep.
And that's what gets you. And that doesn't mean that I have not had, depressive thoughts or moments when I felt depressed. But I also think
you can talk through them with someone instead of, poisoning yourself with your own thoughts, basically.
And even sometimes your own medical doesn't have to be your therapist. Your own primary care physician can give you an exam and evaluate it. But if you don't have access to the basic care, and imagine we have reached adulthood, right? Like our brain developed. What happens with the little ones who have these big emotions and nothing to process, who are afraid for their parents, who see their abuelitos get sick, who see their papis or mammies who are not being able to go out there or to stay with them and help them in their homework because they have to go to work. And or when their parents, a lot of immigrant parents rely on a school to help their children with education because they don't have the educational level themselves. If you have an education level of 2nd grade, how do you help your kid once they get past that grade?
And the other thing is, when you as an adult have children and you're going through mental health issues, you are emotionally unavailable for your children. You know, you can't take on any more stuff because you're full of things. Your head is full, your emotions are full. And so, you know, if your kids come to you with their own mental health issues, you're unable to help them. You know, you have to take care of yourself first and then take care of others. But also the Latino way is, you know, I need to take care of my family and I'm just gonna forget about myself and I'm gonna work myself to the bone and you know, for the sake of others, or also just like, you know, forgetting yourself, you know, for the sake of your kids or your family. Not only parents do that, but also women do that, you know, as their caregivers for their parents or their grandparents or their, you know, their little brothers and sisters or things like that, you know, forgetting about themselves to take care of others. And so there's a big cultural challenge here, but if we want to move forward as a country, we have to understand these cultural challenges that the U.S. population, the U.S. citizens have, just so they can be a healthier community, and healthier citizens and healthier workers. You can't just like peg things on like the companies or like things like that. You can't just like wait for, you know, businesses to take care of their employees' mental health. Not everyone can afford to do that, and it's expensive, it's hard, and so it's like it's a job of between, like, there's different things, right? There's, you know, establishing good systems of protecting your citizens, to passing legislation to make things easier for people, and then 3, don't discriminate them.
But I think right now we're living through the opposite, right? Like when you think of some of the legislation we've spoken in our last episodes, we're talking about dismantling Roe v. Wade and what is happening. We've had conversations about gun violence. And these are things that attack some of the 2 most vulnerable populations, right? Like women, trans folks, marginalized, members of the LGBTQ community. If you put on top people of color who hold those identities, and then the little ones. When we, you know, I grew up in Guatemala, and I'm going to tell you what the drill was. There is earthquakes. Mm-hmm. They will sound the alarm. We will like create the triangle of life. There's, you know, it will stand for 10 minutes. That was like the length of the earthquake. And then we will all line up and we will have like our space in the patio, right? That was a drill. Mainly because it was something that you had to be ready and not too worried, because it happens all the time. It's a natural thing. But
it's
I
still
don't ever
nerve-wracking.
remember. Yes, it is. But that's what you prepare, right? Like if you feel like you know what to do. But the likelihood of, I never had to worry about not being safe in a school, right? Like the worst thing that could happen to me in a school is you get reprimanded and sent home with a note to your parents that you have to show and they have to sign, and you have to explain to your parents why you were misbehaving or talking in class or something like that. And even, you know, and you look back and you think about parents buying bulletproof backpacks.
Oh my God.
You think about teachers having a strategy of what they would do, what they would use to protect their children if there was a scenario. Like, is it stressful for educators? Is it stressful for staff? We're asking little people who don't have frontal lobe development to manage a lot. Imagine how much stress gets accumulated in those little bodies in ways that they cannot process them.
Yeah.
And
I mean, everybody's always talking about, you know, trying to keep your children trying to keep your kids protected from like, you know, the woes of every day, like, you know, you don't tell your kids that you lost your job, or, you know, things like that, because like you want to protect them from like sadness. But then they go to school and they have to face horrendous things. So it's you know, there's no protecting your kids, you know, once they go to school. And so that's the government's job. The schools are the government's job.
They should be, at least in this country where there is like there's public education, which is being fought for years to be dismantled. Let's face it, like there is a lot of legislation that is trying to take away funding and, you know, give people vouchers. Like it's always trying to move public resources, all our resources, all our tax money, to make someone else money. And instead of us being like, how about we just invest in our community and we make sure we have clean air, clean water, good education, good food to eat, public transportation, and medical health. There's 6 things right there that will improve the life of the majority of the people in this country. And sometimes, many times, I know we talk about a lot of like the communities of color. The majority of the people who suffer these you know, desgracias is white poor people, because there is still the majority of people in this country are white and no one is replacing them. So they have selected and elected politicians, representatives, people who harm them. They vote against their own interest.
Yeah.
Because we cannot share with other groups that we perceive as not having contributed. And for anyone to think that the African American community has not contributed wealth to this country does not understand that this nation was built on a stolen land by the labor of an enslaved people. And none of that wealth went to any of these communities. It was extracted. So
yeah, but
African American people
in Latinos, you know, to a different level as well, because you know, Latinos have been the ones, you know, in the fields, cleaning everything, cooking everything, and, you know, just in the back, you know, backstage. That's all Latinos. You go to every restaurant. I think I've said this before.
Yes.
Go to every restaurant. The dishwashers and the cooks are all Latinos. The servers. You go to any office late at night, Latinos are cleaning that office. It's like, you know, this was built on the back. This was built on the backs of African Americans and Latinos and immigrants of color. And like you said, none of that wealth went to them, but they're all paying taxes.
Yeah, we probably pay more taxes than a lot of the wealthiest people in this country do, because you know, there's this perception, they're smart. And I was like, so if I go to the store, you know, the other day I was grocery shopping and I saw the cashier call a person, and I thought that the person had left something. That's what I turned around and said, sir. And he had something he had bought in another store, and he walked into the grocery store with it. And she was like, can you show me the receipt? And he was a white man. And he was like, sure, of course. He showed the receipt, and he was like, oh, I'm sorry. But this idea that we have to police each other all the time, for that, what he had in his hands probably wasn't worth more than $10. But we allow people who steal large amount of money, who defund us, but because we consider them to be from the upper echelons, from the, you know, high class, then they get away with it. And we pay a lot of taxes. Poor people pay a lot of taxes. Poor people do a lot of work. There is no laziness. There is a lot of work on surviving. And you said it right, like, we would not have food in this country without the farm workers who are mostly immigrants. Not all of them. And the rest, many of them, are from rural communities that are white and poor working class as well. So that idea of like economic solidarity, of economics of solidarity, those ideas of like how do we elect officials who create policy that benefit most of us, regardless of which group we belong to. That's the way to go, but we have to overcome all that mentality that has been given to us for a reason.
Yeah, and I also was talking to a Latino the other day about all of this, and he said, well, there's also the thing about these quote unquote handouts, like people like Latinos are all like, oh, I don't want any handouts, because I work hard, I don't need any like free things. It's like, it's your money, you paid for that. You deserve to get some of it, because like you paid a lot of taxes for it, and it's all coming from your own taxes. It's not free stuff. And so it's there's like a twofold, obviously, as usual, the things that we talk about here, some of it has to our paradigms that the government needs to change, and the other is that we need to change. So
and Clem, you this is what you do day to day. You prepare content, you deliver messaging, you think of the meaning of words, you prepare, and that is, that idea that I always say, like, is public education, is public health, because it's not free education. Many people come here and say like, yeah, you can send your kids for free to school. I'm like, no, it's not for free. We all paid into it. Like, if you have no children, you still contribute. I'd rather see taxes go to like health, education, like that. But I know that most of my taxes go to support the military industrial complex, the army. It bothers me. And I also know that the military is one of the largest social programs of this country. It's also meant to support people and provide opportunities that they could not achieve in any other way. But we don't understand that, right? Like, and it's in such a convoluted language, a difficult language, that we cannot begin to comprehend how these things that we see every day pass by legislature, by politicians, by the Supreme Court approved, who was not elected, by the way, affect our everyday ability to live a thriving life in community.
I agree. Yeah, so there's much work to be done. But one thing, like I said at the very beginning, is that even though mental health is, comes second, third, fifth in priority in many, political conversations, the economic effect that it brings, when you have an unhealthy society trying to work themselves to the bone, doesn't compute. Something is gonna give, and I think it's giving right now. And so important to keep it in mind, both on our side as regular people. Let's take care of ourselves. Let's try to do some self-care, but also let's try to vote for people that care about this. Let's try to vote for people that want to ease the pressure off of us. In all kinds of ways. So we can be healthier. Because we all know it, that when you have a space to rest, to enjoy yourself, you are so much better, so much more productive, so much more efficient at what you do. And even
I was reading recently that I think even the term burnout has been like classified as has like a symptoms, symptomatologia, and I just realized, like, I'm glad that we realized that these things are affecting us and we're paying more attention. So there is work being done, but as citizens, our responsibility, I think, continues to be to how do we vote or elect options that, as I said, care for most of us, regardless of how they identify. And that would be our homework, right? We're in election year. We're heading toward primaries in many places. When let's ask these questions from our candidates. If you get contacted by a candidate, ask them, what are you gonna, how do you feel about what is happening to the Latino community out there? How do you feel about, the gaps in the schooling? How do you feel about, public education and public health? Those are conversations we need to start to have in our houses, in our homes, with our children, with our teenagers, with those, if you're in a mixed status family, for those who are going to vote.
Yeah. And I know that some of these are tough conversations to have, but they're very necessary.
Yeah. And I do think that our younger generations have better language to have these conversations. I know that our older generations have a little bit more harder time thinking of like therapy. That's not for me, and I think therapy is for everyone.
Yeah.
Myself.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like everyone needs a therapist.
Yeah, you need an unbiased, objective person that you can run things by.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not a therapist, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's a friend. But obviously, like, friends are very biased, but they're always gonna just like support you, and maybe not all of them may like give you the cold hard facts. So you just need someone objective that will talk to you or listen to you. And give you an unbiased, objective view of what you're going through. So, obviously professionals are great, but if you can't afford one, a mentor will do, an uncle, a cousin, something.
Yes.
And in the meantime, let's vote for better legislation around this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Clem.
Thank you. And thank you guys out there. I know we've been kind of taking on some heavy duty topics out there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. And if we should continue speaking about this or other topics that you may think that will be worth discussing. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Ceci, for giving your awesome point of view as usual.
Thank you.
And if you want to get in touch with us, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at LatinXYZPod. My email is clem@latinxyzpod.com. And if you like this podcast, please share with your friends and give us a rating. And,
or a review.
Or a review. So see you guys next week. Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.